Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Monday Q&As. My voice is not perfect today, but let's try to knock this out anyways. First question. Helpful or not, buffalo/bow bar for bicep irritation from squatting? Are there technique flaws with the straight bar that cause more irritation? All right, when he's talking about buffalo bars or bow bars, bars that have a curve in them, so when you're gripping it, your arms are lower down. This is one of the issues I have with low bar squatting. One of the reasons I tell guys, most athletes and people who are concerned with performance, I would rather them high bar squat. Stick to the low bar squat if you're going to actually compete in powerlifting using the low bar squat. The high bar squat tends to be easier on the shoulders, and for people who are doing, again, a lot of various athletic training, you can't really afford to get irritated shoulders. Now, not everyone is subject to this. This depends on people's individual anatomy and things. But me, for example, having torn a bicep before, I used to get irritation in my left bicep tendon down here that had to be woven back in. And in my case, the low bar squat really irritated my bicep tendon a lot due to the pull on the shoulders out here. So I went purely high bar squat when I got back into competing in powerlifting after I got sick and had to come back to training finally. But that's the issue there. A lot of people simply can't low bar squat without irritation of their shoulder joints due to that pulling on the shoulders from the arms way out here. And in that case, if you want to actually train the low bar squat, the buffalo bars or bow bars can help. But again, you might still run into issues when you get into competition if you have this issue during your training. All right, next question. Hey, Jason, can people have a fat-free mass index of 22 and still obviously be on drugs? Yeah, the reality is tons of people do. Look at Lance Armstrong. His fat-free mass index probably wasn't higher than 20. He was using testosterone, growth hormone, EPO, everything. So it's very possible. This is something I'm going to cover a lot more as I do the How to Spot a Fake Natty series. I'm going to gradually work my way down from guys who are so massive that they're way above the 25 fat-free mass index down to guys who are underneath it and show you guys individual signs of certain drugs may be used. It's not necessarily saying that all drugs will make people look that way because they obviously won't. But yeah, there are definite signs you can look for to tell that people are on drugs who have a fat-free mass index that is within the obtainable natural level. And studies have shown that most steroid users actually still have a fat-free mass index of lower than 25. All right, next question. What happened to Grumpy Cat and that sports mug you used to have? They stayed in the UK. In all seriousness, why is there so much talk about butt wink and squats, but when you look at Olympic snatch lifting ass to grass being done with 500 plus pounds on a regular basis, I'm confused. How do they get around lower back issues going so deep? I know you don't usually recommend going much lower than 1 inch below parallel. Well, how they get around the butt wink? They don't have weak lower backs and weak cores. If your entire core and your spinal erectors are strong enough, butt wink is not really an issue. It's only an issue for people who have underdeveloped cores, and therefore they tend to injure their lower backs as a result of that. If you've built up a really, really strong abdominals, obliques, spinal erectors, butt winking is generally not the problem that it's thought to be. Again, it's only an issue for people who have weak lower backs or weak abs. For everyone else, it's not really that big of a deal. It's been overhyped. And yeah, you'll see athletes like that rarely get injured in their back as a result of doing that. All right, next question. Can kettlebell swings be substituted in place of hyperextensions on your novice program? Well, the purpose of the hyperextensions in the novice program is to just ensure that people get a little stronger spinal erectors, going back to my first question. I'm really beating up your lower back on the novice program, and as people get stronger, they won't be able to do that much work for all of it anymore because of the workload. But while they're weak enough to use the novice program, it's really beneficial to do all that extra core work. Since kettlebell swings can also be a great movement to work those same muscles, I have no problem with people doing kettlebell swings in place of the hyperextensions on the novice program if they can do them safely and competently and they know that their technique is good on it, so they're not going to hurt themselves. All right, next question. I recently acquired a boxer's fracture. Will it be fine to train with modest discomfort, or should I let it heal thoroughly before putting weight on it? I usually train in the 275 to 300 range on bench. Deadlifting is clearly out for a while. All right, for those who don't know what a boxer's fracture is, that's a fracture up here of the bones inside your hand. Now, the thing is, on your bench press, it shouldn't be bothering you a lot because the bar tends to sit down here if you're benching heavy. Assuming you're benching around 300, you probably know how to bench at this point. The bar is sitting down here on the meat of your hand. The issue is going to be gripping it too hard. So yeah, because you might be used to gripping the bar really hard and that also affects your neural efficiency, you may want to go ahead and cut the weights back a bit. Maybe cut your normal work sets about 10% of what you normally do just to maintain your strength and size while you let that fracture heal, because it's going to take it about 4 to 6 weeks to really heal up properly. And obviously deadlifting heavy rows, things like that are out of the question. To even row or do lat pull downs, you might need to get some of those little hooks, those straps that people get around the wrist with a hook on it. And hopefully you don't lose too much grip strength while doing that. All right, next question. As a natural lifter on its first year, one can usually expect to put 1 to 2 pounds of muscle on per month. How much should one expect to regain a month? Okay, as far as the regaining goes, I'm assuming you're talking about someone who's detrained a bit. About the same rate. And honestly, what I find in my experience after having detrained, you will gain the same amount of muscle that you gained as noob gains, usually regaining muscle. So obviously that first year, you're going to end up about where you were at the end of the first year. That's what happened to me. If you guys remember my 1 year transformation after I came back to lifting, I was only able to bench about 265. I was only squatting, I think my max squat was around 400. But I was deadlifting a lot, but we're not going to get into all that. The deadlift, I'm just, I guess, gifted at, and I didn't really even train it that hard to get it back there. But in terms of overall size, yeah, I only got back to about 198, high 190s at around 16% body fat, if you guys remember the after pictures. And I might have actually been higher than 15% body fat. I had at least one expert look at it. I believe it was Alan Aragon, because I was friends with him back then, said about 15%. So really, I barely outpaced normal noob gains in that year. I gained about 1.5 years worth of progress while training really, really well in 1 year's time. And that was while on TRT also. So muscle memory is there, but it's not going to work as extreme as people think, meaning you're not going to gain 5 pounds of muscle a month coming back off of muscle memory. It's about the same as noob gains in my experience and my observation of other people. So again, expect about the same rate, 1 to 2 pounds of muscle per month if you're training and eating properly. All right, next question. What is your take on the common belief that vertical pulls create width and horizontal rows create thickness? I don't believe in that at all. I've seen a few articles recently that indicate that horizontal rows are best for both. Okay, guys, the lats, you're not really going to develop one part of the lat more than the other. The reason that you alternate through different lifts sometimes is because various support muscles get fatigued, and once they get fatigued, you're going to need to take them out to a larger extent to keep focusing on the lats. Because rows and things tend to fatigue the traps. They tend to fatigue the spinal erectors. All these support muscles more than, say, chin-ups or lat pull-downs do. You generally do them first in your training, and then you just do the more direct lat work. The rows versus these vertical pulling movements don't really work the lats more or less than the other, as long as you're training them through the full range of motion using progressive overload. You're not going to see a difference there. So they all build width the same. The thickness that people are talking about is not the thickness of the lats. It's things like the thickness of the traps, thickness of the thoracic erectors, spinal erectors. That's going to come from doing things like heavy rows, and particularly things like heavy deadlifts. That's what builds those muscles up. So that thickness has more to do with that than just the lats, because the lats are going to get thicker. But again, the back thickness people are talking about for guys who already have developed lats is those other support muscles that you're thinking of. That's what really creates the thickness. And again, rows, deadlifts tend to do that best. All right, next question. Hey Jason, due to lack of time, I may have to decrease my workouts from 4 days a week to 3 days a week. My question is, how would you approach your training? What exercises would you focus on? Granted that powerlifting is what I train for. Thanks a lot. When I was training for powerlifting, doing 3 days a week myself, sometimes I just did full body. And even when I was doing Bulgarian type training, I tended to limit my accessories to 2 to 3 days per week and just focused on mostly squats and bench press the other. So what I would recommend for you would be the same thing, unless you're really, really advanced and on a lot of drugs, and that's way too much for me to cover here. Again, any program that focuses on the progression on the squat and the bench on your 3 days per week, and then deadlift, don't deadlift heavy more than once a week. Maybe use your other day with a 70% work, or even deadlift accessory works like Romanian deadlifts, things like that. And that's what I would recommend, and just do your accessory work after. But 3 days a week is more than enough for you to develop a really good powerlifting total and for your big three to go up. So just a full body 3 days a week. Again, with most of the focus being on the squat and the bench press, and then extra accessory work for the deadlift on 2 of the days a week, and only pull heavy once a week. All right, next question. And guys, these last 2 questions are going to be more drug related. So if you don't care about those, you can go ahead and tune out now. All right. If someone is lifting for several years and then takes several week-long break from lifting, but either starts using gear or significantly increases the dose, will that someone lose strength and or muscle? No, if someone has been natural and they start doing their first cycle while they're taking downtime, they will gain muscle. absolutely gain muscle. If they've been using a certain amount and they largely increase their dose, they double or triple the amount of stuff they're on, and they take that downtime, they will gain muscle during that several week period. Absolutely, hands down, unless they're starving themselves. Now, as far as the strength goes, what will happen, your strength from the muscle gains will go up, but your neural efficiency and your motor unit learning will go down. So your max bench might go down in regards to your actual technique and your neural efficiency with it, but all the primary movers moving it are going to get bigger. So for some people, the bench or their squat might go up. For some, it might go down, but as soon as they retrain the motor patterns, it will definitely go up. So you're dealing with multiple components here going on, but yeah, the reality is drugs are that powerful. People will gain muscle even if they're in the middle of detraining. All right, next question and last question of the week. Would SARMs be a good way to bridge in between cycles while doing PCT and taking time off? I don't generally advocate PCT or time off. However, this is called bridging. Historically, what most guys have done, who I've known over the years, who don't want to be on, say, TRT doses in between and just stay on testosterone, they'll usually either bridge with either low doses of Dianabol, Anavar, things like that, first thing in the morning, or they'll tend to do things like use growth hormone, HGH, all the way through their downtime. And what's becoming more popular now with their availability, people will use peptide stacks in between. But with SARMs coming out, and if the SARMs are not suppressive to your HDPA, and you're wanting all of that to recover, and that's your whole purpose of it, you've done HCG, all this other stuff to get your sperm count back up, your natural production back up. If you're using a SARM, and SARMs seem to be getting better now, some of them actually work, but there's a lot of fake ones out there. Yeah, that might be a viable method to hold on to all of your muscle mass in between your blasts without suppressing your HDPA, if that's what you're really concerned about and the reason you're taking downtime. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.